Welcome back. I just wanted to share the testimony of how the Lord brought me from Dallas to Missouri. I love this story, and I hope you've watched the other ones of how he brought me from Colorado to Dallas, because they're really connected and there's a lot of details that overlap, and it's really beautiful how the Lord does that. And it's part of just building your history with him, and certain things will mean certain things to you over time with him. It's kind of like when you have inside jokes with someone, or when you have history, you really develop almost a language where you speak to this person, and the Lord does that over time as you just obey. And so I encourage you, before you finish this one, to go back and watch the other videos that are specifically about my transitions, because it's connected and it's really important for even just understanding the whole picture. But how it started for me with Kansas City. So in 2022, March 1st, the Lord woke me up in the middle of the night, and I heard this question, and it was, what if you went to Guatemala again this summer? And it was out of nowhere. I was literally sleeping. I was sleeping, woken up out of my sleep, and I hadn't thought about nations in a really long time. I had laid them down. Every year that I was in Dallas, there were mission trips that were possibilities through my Bible school, but the answer from the Lord was always no. So it was something I had to put on the altar. And so for him to give it back to me was really precious. And so I really took it to heart, and I spent that whole week just processing with the Lord, asking him, like, what is happening? Reaching out to the orphanage that I'd been with before, asking if they were even accepting interns, if it were possible for me to come that summer. So I did everything on my end, and during that time, because they took a week to respond, I was already starting to grieve, because I knew that I was going to Guatemala in the summer, and I knew that it wasn't just a summer thing. I knew that I was saying yes to transition in the fall, because from the last videos, my transition to Dallas, Guatemala, me going for the summer, was really pivotal in me moving from Colorado to Dallas. So for him to invite me to go to Guatemala again 4 years later, I knew that he was inviting me into not just a summer internship, but to so much more in transition in the fall. So since last year, since March, I knew that I would be transitioning in the fall. I just didn't know where. And so I just had my heart open and receptive to wherever the Lord wanted to send me. I genuinely thought it would be Guatemala longer. I was just wide open. I didn't have a particular place in mind. And so the orphanage finally responded a week later, and they actually said that the country was closed due to just different regulations. And so I was a little confused, because I knew that the Lord had already told me that I was going. And so for them to say the country was closed and they weren't accepting interns, it put me on this spiral. So I just laid it down and surrendered. But at this point, I had already told so many people that I was going, and that I knew that it was unto like change in the fall. And so it was really an interesting space to navigate. And then it wasn't until a month later, so April, that I get an email from the orphanage saying that the country had opened, so that they were accepting interns now. And so it was really interesting that the Lord spoke, will you come? The country was closed, and then a month later it opened after I initially reached out to them. And so it's beautiful. And so just to encourage you, if you feel like you're hearing the Lord on something, but it's not right now, or the process looks different than you thought, just know that you hear his voice. And so just keep going and keep being obedient to whatever he says, because in my heart, before I got that email, I knew that either it was a word and a promise for a later time in life, or he was going to open the country for me to go, because he told me I was going. And so I end up going in the summer, and it's incredible. But before that, my heart's wide open to, okay, God, where am I going in the fall? And I was still a student at USM, Upper Room School of Ministry in Dallas, and for our end of the year ministry trip, we actually came to Kansas City to go to the Send and to serve at the Flood Week that they had all the week prior to the Send. And it was so much fun just serving that week, serving this city. And we ended up going to the International House of Prayer. We just hung out around the city. It was really fun. And I remember all during that week, my heart was just so at home and at rest. And I really just enjoyed it. I was just shocked at how peaceful it was, especially coming from a big city. It was really nice. And I remember having these thoughts that I was like, wow, Lord, this is a really peaceful, sweet place. I would love to spend a season of my life here. And I'm internally having all these thoughts, but then I think like, okay, back to reality. Where am I gonna work? Where am I gonna live? What am I gonna do here, you know? And I remember one day we went into a coffee shop and I saw that they were hiring, and I was like, huh, that's interesting, because I'm a barista. I have a lot of barista experience. So I'm like, okay, cool, you know, just a coincidence, whatever. And then I end up meeting at that same coffee shop later on in the week with a friend that I have known from Colorado. And she says, literally, you know, I was thinking about you a couple days ago before we met up, and I just wondered if you would ever live here. And I was like, very like shocked, because internally I'm having all these feelings of like, wow, it feels like home here. I enjoy being here. And then externally, all these things are coming at me that are saying like, hey, if you want to come, you can. Because my two things that I needed to happen before I came was that I needed a job and a place to live before I moved here. And so I knew that that coffee shop, I knew I could have a job there. And my friend I met up with, she offered for me to live with her and her family. And so it's just beautiful. So literally we were here for that week in May for our ministry trip. The last day that we're here, I apply to that coffee shop job. And then later on, you know, in the summer, I reach out to my friend and just say, hey, like, you're still down for me to live with you? And she and her husband said yes. And so I moved here in the end of September of 2022. And it's just been an incredible journey and really easy, you know, like there was a cost, and I spent the rest of my time when I was in Dallas, I was grieving and I was saying goodbye and surrendering and letting go of all the things that the Lord had asked me to lay down. But the transition was truly, it was like there was a train that was moving, and the Lord said, hey, I'm the train. You can get on it or not. And it was just a choice. And all I had to do was step on that train, get on it, and everything was taken care of. And so my encouragement to you, if you feel the Lord calling you to do something, just go, just do it, and trust that He is a really good leader. All along the way on the process, when I spoke with friends and leaders, they all blessed me to go. Of course, they were sad that I was leaving, but they blessed me to go because they knew I was hearing from the Lord, and they saw the fruit of my previous decisions, that I wasn't just wandering, I wasn't just going and doing nothing, but I was really following the Lord. And it's interesting because the three things that He told me to be involved with when I moved here were very similar to what I was doing in Dallas. So I really wrestled with the Lord and asked Him, like, okay, why would you send me to a whole different city to do the exact same things on the day-to-day that I was doing in Dallas? Like, what is the purpose of that? What is the point? And I really clearly felt Him say that it was people, because there were different people here in Kansas City than there are in Dallas, and that it was just very important that I was here before the year started. And so that's why I ended up moving in the fall. And so hope my journey and story encourages you. And it's always beautiful to just look back on the way He leads you and the way He speaks to you, because it's all just one big story. It's not separate seasons of your life, but it's all connected. Even the fact that my friends that I'm living with now, I've known them for so many years, but how it wasn't until 15 years later that now we're in the same city and God's doing a work in us. And so you never know what the Lord's gonna do. You never know who He's gonna use. So keep your heart wide open and follow Him. I just want to encourage you with Psalm 95. It's also in Hebrews 3 and 4. And it says, today, if you hear His voice, do not harden your heart. And so I just say, keep your heart open and let Him lead you, because He is the perfect leader.